Lutheran History Podcast, where we cover over 500 years of Lutheranism. We hear new stories, examine old heroes of faith, and dig into the who, what, and why of history making. Whether you are Lutheran seeking to understand your faith's rich roots, a history lover, or a person looking for stories of trials, tragedies, and triumphs, you'll find what you're looking for right here. Now, normally, I interview a professional or independent historian, and so far, all men who have conducted original research on some aspect of Lutheranism and have presented it in some way, usually as a book or as an article. Today, we'll talk to a person whose job it is to help researchers do their work so they can share their findings with the rest of us. Today's guest is Susan Willems, the Wells Archivist. Susan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, do you mind telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I have been the Wells Archivist for almost 5 years. In June, it'll be 5 years. And I professional full-time archivist that the Synod has had. Up until this point, the archives had been run by volunteers who had an interest in Synod history, but they did not have any professional training as an archivist. So that alone is an exciting opportunity to be the first full-time professional archivist that the Synod has had. Before I accepted this position, and everything, my husband and I lived in Colorado. That's where I am originally from, is Colorado. And I was working for the University of Denver in their archives and everything. So that's where my training is from, and that's where I was prior to accepting this position. So that's it. My husband and I, we have 2 little girls, ages 5 and 4. So that keeps life busy and hectic outside of work and stuff. So when we get a chance to do fun things and stuff, we love watching sports and especially hockey. We're big hockey fans in my house and stuff. And then, just being outside, doing fun things like that. So all those things that you do when you have kids of a little bit younger age and stuff like that. So I see what I'm trying to think, but I've always had a love of history. This goes back to when I was a little girl, and I started reading those historical fiction books, the American Girl series, and they take the life of an average little girl from a different time period and talk about their daily lives and stuff like that. And I remember reading those and just thinking, wow, this is so different from how I live. This is so neat. I love learning about how people lived in a different time period. And so I was probably about 7 or 8. And ever since then, I've loved history. I've loved learning about history, reading about history, and stuff. So finding a job that I get to play with history and I get to play with historical things all day long, I mean, that's just fantastic for me. So it's really been a lifelong, really just a lifelong interest of mine. History has been. So.
Well, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing. My sister also liked those books, so I confess I did read one of them on a very, very long car ride. So I know a little bit what you're talking about. I think it was the Felicity book, one of them I read.
She's a good one. She's a good one.
Well, it was, I think, on a road trip to Williamsburg, so it was pretty appropriate.
There you
but
go.
Anyway, yeah, my sister also liked that stuff, and now she's a historic preservationist. That's what she decided to get into.
There we go.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story. Now, you said you're the first professional archivist that the Wells has had. Well, can you explain a little bit what kind of training and education was necessary for you to become a professional archivist?
Sure. So my undergrad degrees, I went to Wisconsin Lutheran College, which is up here in Milwaukee. And I majored in American history, and kind of by chance, I ended up minoring in theology, which at the time I had no idea that would be something that would be useful for me in a future career. from WLC, I went on and I got a Master's of American History from Marquette University. And then after that, I took some time off from school. My husband and I moved from the Milwaukee area out to Colorado. And it was really while I was at Marquette that I was introduced to the world of archive research. And so I had a couple of projects at Marquette that really required primary source research, utilizing the archives that they had there on campus. And I just thought, wow, this is really neat. I like this. So in between taking time off, I did some research into what do you need to do to become an archivist, and what you need is it's not a master's in American history. You need a master's in library and information science. So I enrolled at the University of Denver and worked and obtained my MLIS degree with an emphasis in archives. And that right there led me into the position that I had at the University of Denver, which was a fantastic way to learn how to run an archives. And I was able to learn, all the steps that you need to do to be an archivist and stuff. And then from there, I discovered I had heard that the Wells was looking to hire an archivist. So I just kind of threw my hat into the ring and to see what would happen.
And here you are.
And here I am.
Yeah. Well, great. Yeah, that's interesting how it kind of was a twist and turns in your path there to get to where you are today. But
it was. And I think too, it's hard for people who are interested in history to find a career path that isn't necessarily teaching. And I knew from early on, God did not gift me with the skill sets to be a teacher. So trying to find a career path that would really allow me to work in a field that I love. I'm really very thankful that he gave me that opportunity to learn about archives and opened me into that world of archives, because this really is a fantastic career. So
yeah, and I'm sure all the other degrees that you got, the American history focus is still useful and helpful. It wasn't a waste of time at all. Yeah.
Right.
By no means. Yeah. Well, now let's go ahead. But before we get too far ahead, just so everyone who's listening will understand, I don't know if all of our listeners have been to an archive or met an archivist. What is an archive? And then what does an archivist do?
Sure. So just kind of broad picture, an archive it's an establishment that houses and preserves and makes available historical documents, photographs, audiovisual material, and it makes them available for researchers. So it can be connected with any organization. Corporate organizations, they have archives. Walt Disney has an archive and stuff like that. So any institution can have an archive, and it's just there to really do what I said: preserve, protect, and make available for research these materials. So as an archivist, my job is doing those things. It's organizing the materials here so that people can utilize them for research. It's preserving documents that might not be in the best condition because of their age. And really just putting that all together to make one location where people are able to access anything really that relates to the history of that organization.
So that leads into the next question. So what is the purpose of Wells archives? Is it basically anything to do with Wells is going to be in there?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it comes down to and stuff. If you were to go and you were to look at the mission statement of the Wells archives, it would tell you that in very simple terms, the archive seeks to document all aspects of Wells administration, mission, and ministry, and to make them available for research. So I have collections that relate to all the different areas of ministry that are run out of the Synod administrative headquarters. So world missions, home missions, communications, all those areas of administration for running the synod have collections here. But then also churches, churches that have had to close their doors, I have their collections here. So when people are looking for, baptism records, marriage records, and stuff like that, hopefully I have those here for them to access and utilize for their research. We have information on all of the pastors that have served our synod, and even open and active congregations. We have information on them, church histories that have been written, and materials along those lines relating to the congregations. A lot of the collections that we have, we also have collections that are from schools that have had to close. So one of the largest collections that I have that makes up the bulk of the collections I have relating to schools is from Northwestern College, which was our synod's pastoral college before it combined with MLC in 1995. And so, anything related to Northwestern College is here in the archives, and stuff like that. So we really have a wide variety of materials, which makes my job a lot of fun because I never know what types of materials I'm going to be going through. We have photographs, we have reel-to-reel film, we have VHS, we have audio cassette tapes and stuff like that. So it's really a wide variety of types of material and then subject material as well.
So that leads to my next question. You've shared a lot of what kinds of things you would find in the Wells archives of the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod, but what shouldn't a Lutheran historian expect to find in the Wells archives?
So really, the material that we have here, it all is very much synod related. You're not going to, we have collections that are from former synod presidents, President Brenner, President Naumann, to name two examples. We have fairly large collections of their papers. However, none of it is personal. It all very much relates to their role as synod president. And stuff. So, people, you're not going to come here and you're not going to find personal letters that they wrote to family members or to friends and stuff like that. More traditional archives will include those types of things in collections when they have, papers from an individual. But here we strictly try and keep within the parameters of it needs to relate to the synod in order to have that material here. So that's really kind of the one area that I think sometimes surprises people just a little bit, is that they'll come in and they'll want to do research on President Brenner and stuff like that. And it all very much relates to the synod.
Well, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, I think just that name association, well, if someone was involved with the synod, it must be at the archives, doesn't always play through necessarily.
Right.
That's not the purpose, right?
Yeah.
All right. So now, Susan, I actually met you in the past. We got to know each other a little bit during my last year at the seminary in Mequon. At that time, the archive collections, at least in part, were stored in the seminary basement. It was convenient for students like me, if we wanted to look at something, to just walk down the stairs after chapel, take a right-hand turn, and there was the archives, and you were there. But also during my senior year, I and a bunch of other volunteers loaded up a truck full of boxes and watched the archive collections drive away. Well, where did they go? Well, why were they moved?
Sure. So, like you said, yes, for numerous years, the archives was held at the seminary up there in Mequon. But really, the space was very, very small for a collection that didn't really fit there anymore. And while we were incredibly grateful for that space that the seminary had for us, it really wasn't conducive to housing historical material. Historical material, it needs very specific conditions in which to be preserved. The main two being temperature and humidity control. And that was really a very challenging aspect to housing the archives there at the seminary. So we actually moved the archives out to the Synod headquarters, the Center for Mission and Ministry in Waukesha, Wisconsin. So about 30 minutes away from the seminary. And the Synod building out there had a fantastic space that was completely unfinished. And we were able to finish that space for the archives, creating a research room. And then most importantly, being able to have a room that is temperature and humidity controlled to store the archives. So as you stated, the first 2 years that I was in my role here as Synod Archivist, I was working to organize and pack materials to move them from Mequon out here to Waukesha. And we did it in 3 major moves over the course of 2 years. Each move, we ended up moving about 800 boxes. So in total, we moved about 1,800 boxes worth of material out here to the Center for Mission and Ministry. And we did it all with volunteers, which is an incredible blessing to be able to utilize volunteers to help with that. And now our space is what you need to have in order to preserve materials long term. So, all those documents that we have from the start of the Synod in 1850, they're in a safe environment where we don't have to worry so much about the humidity getting too high or the temperature getting too high in order to protect them.
So you're mentioning that temperature and humidity, climate control was a major factor, not just the space, but that was huge in that decision to move them. Why is the temperature or humidity important? What could happen if those things aren't right, I guess, is another way to ask.
So I'm sure paper's biodegradable. And you know what happens to paper when it gets wet. It gets very soft, it gets very pliable, it rips very easily. And it's the same with humidity. And since archives are most likely predominantly paper-based collections, you really need to make sure that you are keeping that humidity and temperature level within a safe zone for paper. Mold happens very, very easily with paper when it gets wet. I'm sure, if you were to go dig around in your basement a little bit, you could probably, and you discovered a book that had been down there for years, you'd probably pick it up and there might be little spots of mold on there. Mold spreads very easily and it is very destructive to paper. So since archives are usually one of a kind pieces of paper, we need to do anything that we can to keep them and preserve them, because I can't just go to my computer and print off another copy of a handwritten letter from 1850. That's not how it works. And so really it's maintaining a consistent level of temperature and humidity and being able to, especially in Wisconsin, where summers get very warm and very humid, then being able to control those environmental fluctuations that happen naturally because of the weather. So out here, the room where the archives are stored, it runs on its own HVAC system, and I'm able then to make those adjustments for temperature and humidity as the seasons fluctuate here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, that's very important then, right? You can use a whole collection. Yeah. Yeah. So yes, very good reason to keep an eye on that. Now, if someone were to visit the archives at the new location, what would they see? We don't have any pictures available, but could you describe what it looks like?
Sure. So one of the benefits to moving the archives out here to Waukesha was that with the unfinished space that was in this building, we were actually able to create a little bit of a visitor center. So when you first come onto the level where the archives is housed, you have a visitor center where you're able to learn a little bit about Synod history. We have a great timeline on the wall that goes through major points in Synod history. I have some artifacts on display, which is really fun for people to see, and stuff like that. So we have that great visitor center space. And then from there, you come into the archives and you walk into the research room. And really all that is it's a big, comfortable space where people can come in and they can work on their research and stuff. So if you are a student writing a paper and you are researching a topic that's going to take you, not just a couple hours one afternoon to research, but you're going to be coming back and you're going to be looking at material multiple times. we have space here for you to go through all of that. And it's an environment that's going to be comfortable for the researcher, but then also protects the materials and stuff like that. So this isn't like a library where you can check out your material and take it home with you to complete your research like you can a book from the library. All of the material has to stay here, which means that people are sometimes here for weeks doing research and stuff like that, depending on the size of the project. So we have a very comfortable space for that. We also utilize a lot of volunteers here in the archives. So they help me organize collections, and they sometimes will help me fulfill research requests and stuff. So we also have space for them to work too, where they can spread out a collection and really work to organize it. And then kind of the last part of the research room that we have is a station that is dedicated to scanning and digitizing material, so that as people submit research requests and say they are in Alaska, I can go through and I can look for the things that are going to help them with their research. I can scan it and then I can share it with them digitally. And so that's one of the blessings of technology, is just the fact that I'm able to help people worldwide, not just people who are here local and can get to the archives.
Yeah, and I'm sure, especially in this past year, I think I have this as a question later, but let's just talk about it. Has
Sure.
the COVID pandemic affected that? Have you been doing a lot more of those kinds of research requests?
Yeah, so actually, just about a year ago, a little over a year ago, our building closed to the public, and we have not reopened yet. So any volunteers that were coming in and helping me with projects, any researchers that have wanted to come in and do in-person research, we haven't been able to do that because of COVID. So really, technology has become much more of an integrated process on a day-to-day basis here in the archives than what it was a year ago. Most research requests now I am fulfilling digitally for people that maybe only live a mile away or 2 miles away, just because they're not able to come in and do the research in person. But there have been some blessings with that. Many collections that I did not think were going to have a digital aspect for a number of years now do, because we've had to shift our focus, from working with the papers to getting those papers digitized. One of the major collections that we have been able to make fully digital is our Synod Convention proceedings, going all the way back to 1927. Those are all digital. They are now keyword searchable, and that's a
Wow.
huge project that we were able to complete here in this last year. So really, that has been a big shift in how archive research is done. People have to be a lot more specific when they submit their research requests now, because I don't know every little thing that they might need for a project that they're working on and stuff like that. So trying to sort through 20 or 30 boxes to find what they're looking for just isn't feasible for me here by myself. So I really have to work with them to narrow down the scope of their research request.
Yeah. Could you give an example of that, maybe, to help, maybe if someone does want to do research, do you have a real example of what they're looking for and how they can help them?
Sure. So a lot of times people will just, one of the more common research requests that I get is, say, a church is looking to celebrate a 100th anniversary, and they want to put together a history of their congregation. So one of the things that I really get a lot of research requests for is, they'll send me, what can you tell me about my church's history? That's kind of a big open-ended question. And yes, I try and keep track of all of the congregations and milestones in their history, but really that is a big open-ended question. So from there, we'll narrow it down. And I'll say, well, can you give me a list of pastors that have served your congregation? And then I'm able to go through and I can look to see if I have obituaries for those pastors, if they were pastors that served in 1900, and stuff like that. So I can get them scans of obituaries so that they have a little bit of biographical information on the pastors. That's one way we can kind of narrow down that. What can you tell me about my congregation's history? Other things that, we can narrow down then from there is looking at, okay, well, do you have specific dates that something big happened in your congregation? You had a new building, you added a school and stuff like that. So really, if we're just able to take those kind of bigger open-ended questions and maybe break it down into 2 or 3 more specific questions, even just that much is a lot more feasible for me to go through and be like, okay, well, here's what I found on this subject and stuff like that. Also, by breaking it down into those smaller pieces, it can really help to focus the researcher to realize where their gaps are in their research topic, and stuff like that. A congregation, they might have a list of all their pastors, but then suddenly they don't have a name of a pastor that served them from 1920 to 1925. Where, even just knowing that time frame, there are certain resources that I am able to access to try and figure out, okay, who might have been there at this congregation at that time. We have district proceedings. We have district presidential papers and stuff like that. And so there's different things that we can do to take that very broad topic and then narrow it down to make it, like I said, just a lot more feasible.
Yeah. So maybe to rephrase it, and you tell me if I'm getting this right, a researcher, it's kind of their job to come up with telling the story, right? They need to, at the end of the day, be the ones who know the facts and the information and the issues involved in their project. You are a big help because you will be able to connect them with the information they need. But you aren't exactly the synod historian who has memorized the biographies of thousands of pastors and congregations either. Correct.
They need to know what their topic is. And if a researcher were here in person, they would come to me and they would say, I would like to know about, President Brenner and stuff like that. To start with, I could hand them a biography that somebody wrote on President Brenner. I'm not going to sit down and teach them about President Brenner. I will provide them the resources to gather that information themselves.
Yeah, and that's immensely helpful for someone who maybe doesn't even know what's available. You can tell them, here's right. What we've got. And sometimes it's a happy day for the researcher because there's a big thick box or a file, and other days it's a pretty sad day. Oh, there's right. Nothing. So that's just kind of the growing pains of a research project, though, is you'll run into that stuff. So
yes.
Have you had anyone ever break down in tears because they didn't get what they wanted, or have you, or maybe been at least disappointed that you're missing something?
Yes, disappointment. Yes, it's also very hard because there are things within the archive that are there. It's private information. We have collections from district presidents. District presidents are involved in a lot of different aspects of the everyday workings in our synod that are private. And so we do have material here in the archive that is restricted. It's not available to be accessed by researchers. And it's always really hard for me when I know that there's more information that I have that I cannot give them, and stuff. So sometimes the disappointment is maybe a little bit more that I know that information is there and I cannot share it with them because of that restriction and that privacy factor. And so, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it is somebody's looking for a pastor and I maybe only have a paper that he wrote for school. And that's about all the information I have on that pastor, and stuff. And I think the disappointment comes especially for the people who are utilizing the archives to help with genealogical research. They're really hoping that I can connect them with a great-great-grandfather and give them that piece of their family history that they're missing. And I just don't have that information. And so those cases are a little bit harder when I have to tell them, well, I'm so sorry, I really don't have any information to help you with that, because I know they're really looking to learn about their family history and make that connection. So there are definitely ups and downs with archive work and stuff like that. But the days that I've been helping somebody with research and we think we've hit all these dead ends, and then all of a sudden you turn the right page or you open the right box of material, and all of a sudden you're there and you have an answer for them, and it's just like, oh my goodness, we found it.
Yeah. And that can fuel someone with euphoria for days or weeks, just finding that
Right.
one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That little research high. For those of us that really like the hunt of research and have that, enjoy that part of history, that little research high that you get when you stumble across something is really a lot of fun.
And that's what makes history dangerous, because it does have that addictive quality to it in that sense. Yeah.
Yes.
And just to circle back to something else you said, just talking about restricted material, just to be clear, right? This isn't something, this is just the church trying to keep its secrets close. Like any archives is going to have restricted material, most likely. Is that correct?
And whether that's something, as, it's hard to come up with very specific examples and stuff like that. But, something as simple as employee files that have Social Security numbers on them, obviously those aren't available for research, and stuff like that. And there are laws, there are nationwide laws that put limitations on things like that we're able to make available. Medical records is another example of things that can be found in an archive. I'm not saying that I have them here. I've never stumbled across medical records here in the Synod archive, but there are other institutions those, because there are laws that protect that type of material. So it really just depends on what type of archive you have, then kind of lends itself to naturally what type of restricted material you might find, or an archivist might find in there. And stuff. And then, we do, as professionals, we do what we need to do to make sure that material that stays private, it is not available for research until laws, until enough time has passed that the laws say we can make it available for research. Or a lot of times if people are donating material and they know that there is sensitive material in there, I will work directly with the donors then to say, well, how long would you like this material to be restricted? And we can do a variety of different things then to restrict that material for 50 years from when it was donated, or 50 years after, a specific event and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things that we can do then that ensures the privacy and whatnot of the people that are involved, and the material that we have.
All right. Well, thank you for answering that question. We had a little bit of internet instability right after I answered the question, so it looked like you got wiped out, but I think we got a pretty full answer there. You're not trying to hide anything. Pretty clear. I think we're back online now.
Okay.
Going back to the questions here, I think we talked a bit about your workday, and I asked a kind of misleading question. What does a typical workday look like for you? Is that a fair question?
It's a challenging question to ask, because I generally don't have a typical day in the archive. So much of what I do depends on the types of research requests that I receive. and what I need to do to fulfill those requests. Certain times of year are busier with research requests versus other times of the year. So again, that can kind of change what I do during the day. But generally, what I'm able to do then is kind of break down the types of tasks that I have into different categories and stuff. So in the course of a week, let's say, that's a little bit more feasible of a question. What does a typical week look like?
Okay.
So I will go through and I will organize and catalog materials. And so we have an online catalog. I'll add more to an online collection. I'll have a collection here in the archive that, was just donated that I need to start sifting through and figuring out what am I going to keep, how is this going to be organized? And so that's kind of one category of what I do. I fulfill research requests. Obviously, we've talked a lot about that. I have administrative tasks that I have to do as the archivist for the synod. I participate in outreach and education, and then I have professional development and stuff like that. So in a typical week, I will at least touch on probably all of those areas of tasks. Some weeks are heavier towards fulfilling research requests. Some weeks are heavier towards organizing and cataloging materials. It really just kind of depends on what needs to be a priority that week. And really what drives that is the research requests. I try really hard to make sure that people are getting their requests fulfilled in a timely manner. Or at least I'm able to communicate with them, this is going to take me a little bit longer. It might take me a couple of days to track down what you're looking for. And stuff. So really it's the research requests kind of drive how the week is going to look. And stuff. And then I fill in my days as I have time around those research requests.
Well, thank you for sharing. And now changing the question a little bit, would your typical week compare well to what other archivists are doing, or is that pretty much a case-by-case basis?
No, I think, archivists, we all do the same types of tasks. So when I was working with the University of Denver, a typical week would contain kind of these same 5 umbrellas of tasks and stuff like that. So really, it's in that way, it's very similar to any archive. We all have to work with the collections that we have and organize them and catalog them. We all are getting research requests in. We all have administrative duties that we have to do. And outreach and education is always going to be a part of this because our jobs rely on technology. So at the very minimum, we're having to keep up with technology and the changes in technology and stuff like that. And then that also kind of ties then too into the professional development aspect of it and stuff. So that, looking at my weeks, yes, I do think that they would be very similar to a secular archive. It's not just that my week looks like this because I'm involved in a church archive.
Okay, that makes sense. So we'll get into those various tasks and duties in just a moment. But I think before we leave the research request topic completely, you've mentioned some people come in to do family history or church history. Who are the typical people who, well, now they're not coming in, but they're at least, who are the people typically making a request, and what kinds of projects do they work on?
So I generally, I've kind of discovered that there are a few main categories of research requests that I receive here at the Synod Archives. The number one research request I receive is people looking to do family history. And stuff like that. They are contacting me because they are looking for a baptism record from grandma or great-great-grandma. They're looking for, records of a marriage that was performed and stuff like that. So really that's probably the number one research request that I feel fulfill is people looking to explore their family history. And those are, I've actually gotten requests from that nationwide. I've had people, over in Europe contact me because they're looking for a family member that was, baptized or married in a Lutheran church and stuff like that. So that can be anybody. Probably the second most common research requests that I get is from congregations that are looking to celebrate major anniversaries. And we kind of talked about what those types of research requests look like. They're looking for biographical information from pastors who've served their congregations. They're looking for help pinpointing different milestones and stuff like that. So that's probably the second most common research request I get. And then the third really just kind of falls into kind of the broad category of academic research. So that's students researching a topic for a paper. It's professors who are working on advanced degrees. They're working on a thesis for a doctorate or a master's, and stuff like that. So that kind of falls into, those are the types of people who, when they are able to come and do research, they're coming multiple times to go through a vast amount of information. And then they're presenting that either in a paper or a presentation or a thesis, and stuff. And then probably the fourth category of research requests that I get is from people within the synod administration themselves. They're looking for historical photographs for promotion within the synod and stuff, or they're looking for information on how we used to do something within the synod administration and stuff like that. Those requests are fewer and farther between. But again, that's one of my roles as archivist then, is to support our administration in their day-to-day tasks as well.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So now you mentioned earlier that when someone comes in to do research, or now asking you to fill out a research request, the more broad and open a question is, the less helpful it is. So you've said maybe the more specific, the better it is. Well, what else does a person need to do to be prepared to do research at the archives? Let's say they were able to come in. Do they need to do anything beforehand, or can they just show up saying, I want to know more about this person?
Sure. So generally how it works is people should contact me first. Just in case I don't have what you're looking for, I'll save you a trip and stuff like that. So contacting me first to give me an idea of the topic that you're wanting to research. That also allows me to do a little bit of groundwork before the researcher even comes. So I'm able to kind of put together a list of material that they might find helpful. I'm able to kind of pull those boxes from where they live on the shelf space and get them ready for the researcher to go through. And then it also, so when they contact me, we set up a research appointment. They schedule a time to come in. I'm able to kind of lay that groundwork for them so that their time is utilized as efficiently as possible when they're here. And stuff like, so, we go through that groundwork, we get everything ready for them. And then when they're here, they are able to, if they have a portable scanner, they're able to bring that with them, and they can scan documents that are helpful for their research. They can take pictures with their cell phones and stuff like that. So it's not just, somebody is sitting here trying to, copy word for word with a pen and paper, pencil and paper, what they're seeing in that document. We have the technology and we're able to utilize that. Certain things that, are maybe a little too fragile for people to handle themselves to scan, I can go ahead and scan for them or get them a photocopy of it, and stuff like that. So really anybody can come in and do that. And the prep work for it relies more on me than on them once we kind of get that topic narrowed down. And stuff. So, I'll work with them to try and, like I said, bring those broader topics down to a few finer points that we can research. And then that puts their time to better use when they're here.
This concludes part 1 of my interview with the Wells archivist Susan Willems. Please come back to the Lutheran History Podcast in 15 days, and you'll be able to hear the second half of our interview, where we, instead of talking about research requests, we talk about the other roles that an archivist plays, especially one involved with Lutheran history.